Now, many in Zimbabwe hope the new regime will be a catalyst for fixing an economy crippled by factors such as liquidity shortages and high inflation rates. Well, Vik Chege tells us more.
When Robert Mugabe resigned after 37 years as president of Zimbabwe, the world suddenly looked at the Southern African country in a new light. Zimbabwe was once one of Africa's most promising economies, but suffered decades of decline under Mugabe's policies. Most of its 16 million people remain poor and face currency shortages and sky-high unemployment, something they hope Mnangagwa will address.
They must not chase away vendors. They have to create some work for the vendors to go to work, so that the vendors, no one going to sell these onions or bananas on the street. That's the first thing they have to create.
The economy has been tough, even for middle-income businesses.
Obviously, there's some economic fundamentals that need to be addressed. And I expect and I hope that the new government will address those things. I also hope that we have a better economy. With a better economy, it impacts us directly. So advertisers, that's how we will survive.
Analysts say the country should be ready to implement strong macroeconomical policies and structural reforms to restore fiscal and debt sustainability.
Mugabe has been viewed as an anti-investment sort of person, given the way the state of the economy is, the collapse of the industry, our relationship with the international community. And Mnangagwa has come across as someone different. Somebody, even from the statements he's released so far or he's made, the economy seems to be number one on his to-do list.
Zimbabwe's economic situation remains difficult and is threatened by high government spending, an untenable foreign exchange regime, and inadequate reforms. Vik Chege, CGTN.
And speaking of the economy, let's get more insight into that. Oswald Bina joins us in Harare. He is the president of the Association of SADC Chambers of Commerce and Industry. You're very welcome to the show, sir. Now, looking to the future of Zimbabwe following that inauguration, there are some growing calls for an all-inclusive transitional arrangement moving forward. Now, will the opposition, the MDC, be included in this new government between now and the next elections?
Thank you for inviting me, and before I answer your question, let me congratulate the people of Zimbabwe for having successfully changed a government without shed of blood. I think it's something that is unique in the whole world. Coming to your question, I think the MDC may not be opting to go into any inclusive arrangement at the moment, considering that an election has been called out in the next 6 to 8 months. If that is going to go by the president's statement. The intervention that happened that led to the change of TEF is a ZANU-PF issue. And it has clearly communicated that ZANU-PF needed to deal with its internal dynamics. And I'm sure the opposition will not be strategic enough to be able to come into a process that will undermine its opportunities come the 2018 election.
Now, sir, realistically, we know the new president, Mnangagwa, he was part of this past government, which is responsible for the ruin of the economy. Now, what economic reforms must be prioritized over the next 9 months?
Indeed, I think the president in his speech acknowledged the failures of the previous government. He has inherited a government that has record unemployment levels, no money in the economy. He has inherited a government with deep-rooted corruption. His priorities really are in a sequence. The first thing he needs to do is to ensure that there is adequate certainty and confidence in the market. Certainty and confidence internally and externally. So an engagement process has to happen. And secondly, he has to attend to national institutions that were deliberately weakened or undermined to, for individual gain. He needs to realign that and realign that yesterday. And thirdly, he needs to attend to this country has got a national debt of in excess of $12 billion. That has been crippling the economic opportunities we had as a country. Over and above that, I think in his statement, he's acknowledged that he's going to try and get compensation to the farmers. A debt again internal that has not been part of the internal debt we do have. So the president has to attend to that in the short term. And lastly, I think what he needs to do is to ensure that we've got adequate liquidity in the market. Our banks cannot sufficiently provide money to the banking public. The president has to attend to that as well. So in essence, he has got the low-hanging fruits, which he has to attend to by appropriate body language to those people that have got money and who are able to invest in this country. I think that's what I can suspect he can be able to do in the short term.
Right. And on that note, what sort of job do you think the finance minister has ahead of him, given that we know that cutting the fiscal deficit and certainly the high levels of public expenditure are a huge concern in Zimbabwe?
Indeed, I think the finance minister's job really is to whip everybody into line. First things first, 90% of the revenues go to employment costs and employment-related expenditure. If a government collects and then spends it on recurrent expenditure, it crowds out any potential investment in infrastructure and other, economic enablers. So the finance minister has to deal with that position urgently. And the second thing is that labor in Zimbabwe, especially in government, has got to be trimmed. They have to reduce the number of employees government has and probably replace some of them to increase efficiencies. The minister also needs to attend to public utilities. Public utilities have traditionally been a drain on the fiscus. They have to either be commercialized or privatized or any other options that may come to the fore. We have to accept that some may actually be allowed to die in the process. Zimbabwe's economy survives on agriculture and mining. The finance minister needs to attend to these areas as quick wins as well as low-hanging fruits, including our tourism sector. I think that will probably give him a trigger mechanism to economic recovery.
And let's drill down just a little bit on the country's high levels of debt. Based on your past experience as Zimbabwe's finance minister, is the Lima debt arrears clearance plan still a valid option for the country going forward, or does the state need an entirely new plan?
The previous dispensation did not accept any proposals that pointed to the fact that Zimbabwe is poor. They tried some gymnastics in terms of a hybrid strategy, which never worked. I think what we need to do with the new government is to accept that by a number of indications, Zimbabwe falls within one of the poor countries in Africa. So as we start to look at debt remodeling, we must be able to also look at possibilities of debt forgiveness. We have a debt overhang of about $12 billion, which is now plus roughly $5–6 billion coming from the agrarian sector. We need now to say, to what extent can we engage those that we owe so that they can restructure our debt or forgive our debt so that we can unlock at least some space to be able to trigger some productivity in the economy.
Well, many thanks for those insights, sir. Of course, that was Oswald Binya. He's the president of the Association of SADC Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and certainly not the former finance minister.